After evolving greatly as a hero and as a person, he became known as the Dragon Hunter after years of adventuring. This nickname was given to the first person who managed to defeat a dragon, and Seong is seen standing imposingly atop the body of one of those beasts. When people saw this news, they were shocked and amazed, and Seong was considered the strongest adventurer in Asia. And Seong was also an ordinary person and the father of our protagonist, and the boy expresses that he respected him deeply. Jeryong remembers his father training with his spear, showing all his power and aura, creating a huge windstorm. More than anyone else in the world, Jeryong believed that his father was invincible until one fateful day when he saw something that traumatized him. Suddenly, the man who was in his physical prime and training began to cough up blood unexpectedly. Our protagonist, as a child, ran towards his father to see what was happening. However, the man asked his son to stop and not come any closer. According to the doctors, the cause of this sudden weakness and decline was poisoning, and Jeryong cried a lot as he watched his father in that state. At the hospital, he explains that during one of his explorations, his father encountered a deadly poison that contaminated him. As he could always done, his father tried to overcome it more than anything, facing the challenges head-on. However, after decades of overworking himself, his body was at its limit, and even that first dragon hunter couldn't withstand it. During the time Song was weak, colleagues he had trusted with his life came and handed him a piece of paper. These people were disguised as vipers who took advantage of Seong's vulnerability at that time and took away his fortune and work. For years, in addition to the illness, he suffered mentally and physically, believing that he had only made mistakes up to that point and that nothing he did was rewarded. Years passed, and even when our protagonist was already a teenager, he saw his father sitting on a hospital bed, his body severely weakened. Finally, Jeryong mentions that years later, the world began to forget about the dragon hunter Seong, and his father lost his identity as a hero. After losing everything and suffering from an incurable poison that no medical science could cure, all that was left as a reward for you was to be a forgotten adventure. We then return to the moment when Jeryong had just defeated Pilju. The boy simply stares at his opponent, then turns around and starts walking away while the man tries to mutter something. Our protagonist, after all the memories, becomes extremely irritated, throwing the piece of iron he was holding and walking towards the exit. The bald man is still shocked by everything he saw, thinking that his subordinate was the strongest man. However, Jo-won remarks that everything went well, though the man remains incredulous, unable to believe that his partner Pilju lost to a kid. But the protagonist boss remarks that perhaps the bulky man wasn't a good adventurer, which could have been one of the reasons. Jeryong interjects, saying that the man was bragging about hitting his own comrades, which was just a sign of how weak he truly was. As he continues walking past the bald man, the boy states that there are only two reasons why a good adventurer retires. Either their body breaks down to the point where they can no longer explore or face creatures, where they die during an exploration and are never seen again. He puts his jacket back on, saying that he didn't know what Pilju's salary was, but if it was more than minimum wage, the bald man should fire him. Jo-won approaches his client, apologizing and asking the bald man to understand their side. He then asserts that now the fee for the job will be doubled due to the situation that occurred. However, the man in the suit is about to protest, but before he can, Jeryong's boss gives him a menacing look, saying that the boy was the one who provoked first. He then adds that he and Jeryong don't work for free, and seeing that he wasn't in the best position, the bald man agrees and says it's fine. After some time exhorting his client, the boy's boss begins to call Jeryong over. The man asks if he has ever heard of the Imperial Wars, but Yu, upon hearing this while drinking water, immediately spits it out. Waking the water from his mouth, Jeryong asks if they'll have to fight that, as even for him, that monster was a bit too much. Jo-won explains that the Imperial Wars is a monster whose danger level is considered the highest, not only in Korea, but in the entire world. What was once a beautiful and lovely city called Uido is now the nest of the Imperial Wars, and has become a demonic kingdom in Korea with extremely high difficulty. The man then explains that even for high-ranking adventurers, taking down one of these monsters is difficult, because these things spread out everywhere. For any smuggler, fighting one of these creatures is practically suicide. However, for a white-rank adventurer, it was extremely possible that they could accomplish it. Jo-won explains that according to the bald man, there was a large raid, the previous day that wasn't publicized. The boss continues the explanation, stating that the government army and 7 white rank adventurers form an attack squad to invade the wasp's nest. Jirion is shocked that they gathered 7 white rank adventurers. And Jo-won adds that adventurers of that level are so famous that if even 2 of them come together, the media goes wild. With this challenge, it seems they fail to achieve the original goal of eradication, but the adventurers manage to hunt the queen wasps. However, one of the 7 stole the royal jelly of the imperial wasps in order to subordinate from the attack squad to smuggle it. Jirion seems confused, not knowing what this royal jelly is, and Jo-won begins to explain that it's a nutritional supplement given to a newly born queen by the wasps. Struggling to understand the situation, you ask why a white rank adventurer would smuggle a nutritional supplement, as it was extremely dangerous. The boy's boss explained that there have been occasions where royal jelly was brought into this world, and from what he knew, if a human consumed it, they could even come back from the dead, and upon hearing this, our protagonist is extremely shocked. In the underground city in a deep subway, we hear someone say that all paths to the dungeons are now strictly controlled. This person begins walking through those abandoned corridors, heading to a certain location while repeating his phrase several times. It is revealed that this person was our protagonist boss, and the man says that this isn't true. Looking at a gate with various red markings, the man thinks that this proves there's always a way to bypass government restrictions. With a blue aura around his hand, he begins to touch the gate, doing something to merge his magic with the markings. His energy reacts with that of the gate, and a massive blue energy light shines throughout the area. The aura is begin to merge with the markings there, and then something happens, and the red markings start to disappear. Our protagonist was right behind his boss, and Jo-won tells the boy that even though he always says this, he'll repeat it, asking Jirion to be careful. As he cleans his hands, he concludes that this job will be especially annoying and a bit more troublesome than the others. For some reason, you remain silent the entire time, just listening and staying quiet. Trying to get the boy's attention, Jo-won blows a puff of smoke from his cigarette into the young man's face. The young man begins to wave his hand to disperse the smoke, and then asks why his boss did that so suddenly. Jo-won explains that he did it because the boy had his head in the clouds and wasn't paying attention to the mission. The boss asks if the reason the young man was acting that way was because he was still thinking about the medicine that could bring the dead back to life. Jirion starts walking toward the gate, stating that it didn't make sense since such things are really not reliable. Leaning against the massive gate, he thinks that even if it's considered an unparalleled antidote, it won't be able to cure his father's condition. And with that, the young man begins to open the mysterious gate from which a strong life starts to emerge. The boy also thinks that if there was something like that, his father would never have abandoned that thread of hope. After opening the gate and passing through it, the young man finds himself in a mountainous region with a beautiful landscape of a clear blue sky. Jirion tries to shield his eyes from the sunlight to get better view of the stunning scenery in front of him. After the adhesion, dungeons were created all over the vastness of the earth. But among them, there are 2 considered the largest in Korea, and they are peculiar. The first is Jeju-do, a dungeon fused with a volcanic mountain range that has active volcanoes and burning rocks. The other is fused with the Agard jungle, and at that moment, the young man was starting to prepare for an exploration. The Agard dungeon is located in what used to be Uhido in the middle of Seoul, where you was. It's possible to see a destroyed city now overtaken by a forest. The young man informs that with Uhido at the center of Meipo, Yongsan, and other nearby cities were all controlled by this dungeon, and most of it remains unknown. A large portion of the region is only D rank, but Uhido, or the Wasp, is S rank, and the person responsible for the jelly tried to transport it to the meaning area in Baroma. June explains that, however, after arriving there, the transporter lost contact with the others, and while he might have fled, it's not the most likely option. The boss also says that the man must have dealt with all sorts of things to get out of there, and while all our protagonists has to do is reach the location and bring back the jelly. But before Juriang sets off, Jo-won mentions that he'll finish his thought, asking the young man not to get distracted and just focus on the mission. Finally, while putting on a mask, the boy asks if his boss thinks he would run away. However, Jo-won firmly states that the boy isn't stupid enough to do that. The boss also asks his subordinate to be careful and remember that the royal jelly